pop that on now. So, I mean, are you happy to sort of explain maybe a bit about who you are and what you do for us, first of all?
Sure. Okay, so my name is Amy Morell, and I am a licensed psychologist. I have a PhD in clinical psychology. I currently am in private practice. I work out of my home because it is the easiest way for me to work around my health limitations and restrictions. I have an office set up in my home, and I do both virtual work and in-person therapy sessions out of the office in my home. I am a professor part-time. I teach just one class at the university nearby, and that's pretty much the only time I really leave my house, is to go teach that one class a week. I primarily use acceptance and commitment therapy in my private practice. I work with quite a few people who have chronic illness and pain, as well as people who have a lot of trauma in their background. And I think that acceptance is a really big piece of the work that I do for people who have those histories. I think it's really important. So that's kind of who I am work-wise.
That sounds like really important work that you do, and something that I can see means a lot to you as well.
Yes, very much so.
And so, I mean, thank you for being sort of willing to share your story with us.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, I wonder if you'd like to maybe take the lead on that in terms of what your story might be and what those conditions you struggle with are.
Yeah, there are many. So I think it's easiest for me to talk about it chronologically. When I was born, almost automatically, it was obvious to my parents and to the pediatrician that I had some breathing problems and some gastrointestinal problems that at the time they weren't really sure what they were, but that there was something going on. When I was 17 months old, I started having seizures and was eventually labeled as having epilepsy. In the beginning, they were originally tied to high fevers. And so at first they thought that they were just related to having a high temperature. But we later found out that that was not true and that it was more than that. By the time I was about 3, I was also diagnosed with asthma. When I was in 2nd grade, I got diagnosed with ADHD. And so it was clear that there were some neurological issues, the epilepsy and the ADHD. As I got older, more and more things started to sort of happen, both neurologically, like when I was 6, I started having chronic migraines. Right. And gastrointestinally, started to have a lot of problems. And then very early on started to have a lot of joint pain and muscle pain. Some things that we couldn't quite explain in my family, except to say sort of like, oh, I was really flexible or double jointed. all of these things ended up leading to a diagnosis of a connective tissue disorder that is called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And then I got genetic testing and found out that I have a vascular mutation. And something that often comes along with EDS is dysautonomia, where I get very dizzy, nauseous, have vertigo, a lot of blood pooling problems, and particularly with the vascular variant of EDS, I have a lot of problems with my arteries being fragile and also malformed. So I have difficulties with my veins and my arteries that lead to my kidneys, lead to my lungs, lead to my liver. And those cause a lot of problems like tumors and possibilities of aneurysms and things like that. I could actually probably go on and on. I guess maybe another really big thing that's related is that I have mast cell activation related to this condition. And basically what that means is that my body responds to many things in the environment as if I am having severe allergic reactions to them. And part of the severe allergic reaction is a pretty strong neurological response.
Right.
So I get a lot of difficulties with my interoception, my proprioception, a lot of cognitive fog, memory problems, word finding disturbances, things like that, because my body is in sort of this fight or flight mode where everything becomes about literally keeping me alive as opposed to higher level cognitive functioning.
Gosh, that sounds extremely tricky on a day-to-day basis to sort of manage that.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, so carry on. You were sorry, I interrupted you on your chronological journey.
No, I mean, and I kind of skipped a bit too, but I think that pretty much sums it up. There have been a lot of scary things along the way, near-death experiences, lots of tricky doctor's visits and tests and many medicines and some surgeries and things like that. Some more coming up soon.
Sorry to hear that. That sounds like that's stressful in itself.
It is. Yeah.
Gosh. Okay. So that's an awful lot to have on your plate, isn't it? You know, from such a young age as well. And like you say, it sort of develops over the lifespan, if you like. So what we think is one thing sort of turns into another.
Right. That's exactly right. Yeah. And it's been really, I guess, the same thing all along, but I didn't know what to call it. And I had this genetic testing done when I was an adult. So
right. Yeah. So that was when you were an adult, you had the genetic testing. And has it helped you to be able to put a name to it at all?
I think it has. At least I can, give it a name, not worry about what it is, because that in itself is another stress.
100%. Yeah. And so, I mean, obviously with all of these different things going on for you, they must sort of all interact every single day. And I'm just wondering what what that looks like for you. You know, you mentioned sort of these attention and concentration things, as well as, you know, difficulties with pain, fatigue, and I mean, talk us through some of that. What does that look like?
Well, every day is different. And in fact, sometimes moment to moment is different. But absolutely, all of those things do interact. Some days are better than others in terms of pain or fatigue. Some days are better than others in terms of my attention span or how well I can concentrate. I do my best to not schedule too many things at once, to give myself breaks during the day, and to give myself a lot of allowance for if I say or do things that seem sort of silly or crazy. I also try not to switch task too often so that I'm kind of in one mode at a time. That helps me a lot. So I can kind of get in a zone and stay in a zone. That is something that I have found is very helpful to me.
Sure.
But like yesterday, I was teaching my class and I had an experiential exercise that I wanted them to do, which is this acceptance and commitment therapy exercise. Passengers on the bus. And we were actually going to act it out in groups, small groups. And I was just simply trying to divide my class into groups of 4, where one person was the passenger. I mean, just did it right then, but that's okay. Where one person was a driver, and then the other groups within the groups of 4 were their passengers. And I could not figure out how to divide my class into even or close to even groups of 4. And I kept trying to do the math in my head. And of course, I got flustered and frustrated because here I was in front of my class and they were probably looking at me and thinking that I was stupid, and, you know, and I was like, okay, how many of you are there? And what's that divided by 4? And then even after they told me, I couldn't count. I mean, I literally could not count chairs. And they were just kind of giggling at me. And then I was like giggling at myself and then trying to just let it go. And I still couldn't. And then finally I just said, someone else is going to have to do this for me. I can't do it. Someone else is going to have to do this for me. And I think that is a really good example of how this stuff sort of gets in my way.
Yeah.
And until I just admitted out loud, this is too difficult for me right now. Someone else is going to have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I was just spinning and spinning and spinning my wheels, and getting more and more frustrated about it. And then I just accepted, I need help.
Mm-hmm.
Someone please help me. And then after I asked for help, I was fine, like emotionally, intellectually, I was fine. But I was just, I mean, it was just crazy. But it was a very bad pain day. Like I was really hurting. And I know that that was contributing to me not thinking clearly because I was hurting. And I couldn't count. I literally could not count. But after I kind of got to a place of acceptance, then everything was fine. I tend to do really well with my clients. Like I don't forget things with my clients. I think it's because I am in a very mindful, quiet place. But outside of that context, I'm apt to just say anything, do anything at any point in time.
I love sort of hearing you sort of say that with a big smile on your face, in the sense that, you know, you've owned it to a degree.
Yes. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I don't imagine that was always the case, like you say, or it was always easy to ask for help.
No, it definitely was not. And it's still a very conscious decision. You know, I think it comes much more easily for me now. But I probably tried to count the chairs 3 or 4 times on my own first before I was like, okay, this is just getting ridiculous. I need help. And it took me years. I mean, I remember getting all the way through graduate school, being very silent about how I was feeling, what I was experiencing, not wanting anyone to think I might be weak or hurting, knowing full well that like I was really struggling, and not thinking that it was okay to say out loud how badly I was feeling, especially physically, but also emotionally, really worried about what it meant to be in that much pain and to be that sick in general.
Yeah. So there's that sort of big fear over your head, I suppose, as well.
Right.
You know, this big thing that is this condition, or these combination of conditions. And that's, I suppose, classic experiential avoidance, isn't it? Is I'm not going to
Yes.
look at it.
Right. And I know for certain that it made things worse.
Right.
I mean, I know it did. But I just was not ready to be open or willing to explore that out loud in front of people.
And what helped you shift that?
I think I saw finally the consequences of how it was just not working anymore. I mean, I could see that it made it worse to avoid. I can actually think of a few specific circumstances. Like there was one time when I was in graduate school where I was very, very fatigued, and that like chronic illness fatigue sort of way, not just like, oh, I'm tired, I didn't, you know, but like you feel like you've, I don't know, run a marathon and then been run over by a truck fatigue. And my mentor had asked all of the graduate students in the lab to work on this project, and I just didn't get it done. I just did not get it done. And a friend had done her part and my part.
Right.
And then not said anything to our mentor about having done my work.
Wow.
And she did it with a smile on her face, but I could see that she then became very, very tired.
Mm-hmm.
And it just devastated me.
Yeah.
That she was so tired from doing my work. And I thought, this is very inconsistent with my values, with what I care about as a friend. I'm going to move because I have a parrot who's starting to talk now.
I was wondering what that was.
He was being very quiet, but I could see that it was just very inconsistent with my values of being a good friend, of being a good student, to do my own work, to contribute. And I think especially that concern about whether or not I would be able to contribute was really what moved me to start to be more honest, because I needed to see how I could really contribute to the world without people kind of cleaning up my messes.
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. And it sounds like, that was something that was so important to you, and, to ultimately be there for your friend, I suppose. And to do that, you had to sort of, I suppose, figure
Yes.
out what was there for you. So, I mean, maybe I know that your specific combination, if you like, of difficulties is quite a rare combination. And I know that there's lots of people, however, who can be relating to lots of the things you've said. So things like the pain or the fatigue, or just that difficulty with, I suppose, accepting that it's all there. And
Mm-hmm.
I wondered if there's any sort of advice you'd give anybody who is struggling with any of those things.
I think the thing that has made the biggest difference for me is reminding myself over and over again that I am not chronic illness, that I have chronic illness, but that I am not chronic illness. And it sounds kind of cliche, but when you really remind yourself of that and you take it to heart, it is actually very powerful. And there's a fine line that I have to walk, that I think that all of us who have any sort of chronic illness or disability have to walk, where you identify with these things. Because if you don't, and you pretend that it's not part of your life or even part of who you are, you will make yourself and people around you much more ill. Like, I have played the game where I pretend that this is not true. Yeah. Like, I've been there and done that. And you just live like you're not sick in any way. That doesn't work.
Not for very long.
Not for very long, right? But realizing that, yes, I have to pay attention to these limitations. I have to acknowledge that illness is part of my life. I have to acknowledge that I may not think as clearly as some other people. Mm-hmm. I may bump into things more often than other people do. And I may have to watch what I eat and pay more attention to how I exercise than other people. And even, be more mindful of how excited I get about things. I mean, even just the tiniest little things. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean that I cannot live a life that matters to me. And it does not mean that that is the totality of who I am.
No, it sounds like that's just a part of who you are when you frame it like that. Admittedly, at times a big part, but
right. Less. Yeah. Right. Like, yes, I have EDS. Yes, I have epilepsy. And I am a psychologist. I am a wife. I am a daughter. I am a friend, Yeah.
You are a parrot mother.
That too. That too.
Sorry, I can resist that.
Yeah.
So so many things that you know, just so powerful from what you've just said. I know there's so many people that would listen to that and will just be so touched by all your advice and your pearls of wisdom. And it's amazing because, like you say, it's this constant evolving journey, and it's not ever like we're out the other end and we can say this is how it's done.
Right.
But,
Yeah.
you know, just those things that you've said are so empowering to people, and I really hope that someone will listen to that and be able to think, you know what, that is going to make a difference to my life. And I really think someone will. I hope so.
I hope so too. That would be nice.
And so is that something that's important to you then? Because I know you've been quite, I suppose, open, if you like, it with in service of this thing that's so important to you, which is spreading awareness and everything.
It is important to me. I would say because I saw the great cost of me being so avoidant at first.
Yeah.
It has become very important to me, not just to spread awareness about chronic illness and disability, although that in itself is important to me, just to spread awareness, period. Because there are so many rare diseases and syndromes that people know nothing about. Absolutely. And that people do not understand. But also to spread the awareness that you can live with things like vascular EDS that people tell you is this horrible, awful thing. I mean, I remember when I first got diagnosed, even though it's a genetic thing that I've been living with my whole life, the cardiologist told me, like, well, literally said to me, don't expect to live past 50.
Wow.
You're going to have to be very, very careful. Never do cardiac exercise again. Never do any sort of strenuous yard work. Yeah. Pay attention to every food that you put in your body. Went through all of this whole list of things, like watch how much you lift. Don't ever lift anything heavier than 20 pounds. Don't, like this whole list of things. And I was like, well, that's basically life, like
everything you enjoyed, or that's everything that,
right.
Yeah.
And it was this very, very grim picture, and totally disregarded the fact that, like, when they tested me, they also tested my parents. And at the time, my mother was well past 50 and had the gene.
Right.
She's now 78. She has the gene,
Oh.
And, that doesn't mean anything necessarily for me. But it also means that, like, doctors don't always know everything. And I don't want to be overly optimistic or like Pollyanna, but I want to live my life to the fullest in a valued, consistent way every day while being realistic.
Yeah.
And I want people to know that that's possible, not to be avoidant and throw out medical information. I do, like I said, I hardly ever leave my house. That's true. Yeah. And although I can't, like, go to a movie theater and watch a movie, have a, TV that I can, like, watch a movie on at home and make it as much like a movie theater experience as possible. Yeah. While I can't go out to a fancy restaurant, I can make a nice meal that I can eat at home and make my dinner table look like a restaurant. Like, you don't have to, you can be psychologically and behaviorally flexible and live your life in a vital way, even with chronic illness. And spreading that message is hugely important to me.
Absolutely. And, you know, I'm hearing that, and I want to thank you for doing just that, right? Because it's hugely important to me and to everyone else as well, that you know, been willing to do that. So thank you. Thank you so much, Amy. Are you happy for me to stop the recording, or is there other things?
Sure. Yeah.